Have you ever faced a problem so big that you didn't know where to turn next? That's what it feels like to face bankruptcy. The U.S. is the world leader in bankruptcy filings, and over 2 million people filed for personal bankruptcy last year. What are the reasons? Loss of a job or business, divorce, student loans, and overspending are just some of the grounds that create this living nightmare. Bankruptcy is not the end of your life. Pay close attention to what this local attorney has to say.
The history of bankruptcy is rooted actually in the Bible. There was something called the Jubilee in the Old Testament where every certain number of years all debt was forgiven. Okay, that was incorporated in our country around 1800 as a way of dealing with something called debtors' prisons. I think the biggest myth about bankruptcy is if you file bankruptcy, you will lose everything you have. You'll lose your house, you'll lose your car, and that's just simply not true. Bankruptcy is a way of dealing with insolvency. Insolvency is when you lack the reasonable means to pay back your debt in a reasonable time. Yes, if you have a lot of equity in your house, then Chapter 7 is not going to be the bankruptcy that you can do, but you can still do a Chapter 13. If you have a car, you can keep your car in a bankruptcy with either Chapter 7 or Chapter 13. The difference is how much equity. If you have a lot of equity, then 7 is not going to be the bankruptcy for you. You can do 13, however, and still keep all of your property.
When I'm deciding whether or not a client should file Chapter 7, I look at 3 different things. What do you own, what do you owe, and how much money do you make? As far as what you own, each state's a little different, so you're going to want to make sure the attorney you choose knows the law in their state, because each state allows you to own a certain amount of property, and you'll hear your attorney refer to those as exemptions. And before you file anything, your attorney will go through what those are and make sure the value of your property won't be in the way. And even if you do own more than you're allowed to own in that particular state, there's ways to deal with that, either through 13 or other ways. As far as what you owe, Chapter 7 can be really helpful with most unsecured debt. And unsecured debt is the common debts that people would think of as having no collateral or property that you put up on the debt. Things like credit card debt. Most unsecured loans, most of the payday loans would fall in that category. A signature loan with your bank. Medical bills are a big one that a lot of clients need to file on. However, it's important to keep in mind with Chapter 7 is that it will not eliminate student loans, most taxes, and you will still owe your secured debts after Chapter 7, your house, your vehicle, that sort of thing. As far as how much money you make, there is a process that an attorney will run through with you to determine whether or not you meet the income standards. And of course, you know, the expense standards will take into account how many children you have or other dependents and all that.
If the debtor's otherwise unqualified for a Chapter 7 for one reason or another, typically it's because of income or because they've got secured assets that they're trying to protect, then we look to a 13. A 13 is an excellent way to protect people that get behind with their mortgage or get behind with their car payments and otherwise want to save those assets. Because during a Chapter 13, over the 3 to 5 year period that a Chapter 13 will run, those pre-petition defaults on the mortgage, for example, would be paid in full over generally a period of 36 months or less. For motor vehicles, generally motor vehicles are going to be paid in full during that 3 to 5 year period through the Chapter 13 trustee. So basically, the debtors keep their vehicles, they keep their houses, and they truly reorganize in a Chapter 13. Chapter 13 is also an excellent way to eliminate general unsecured debt. Rachel had talked previously about credit card debt, medical bills, and the like. Well, just because you file a Chapter 13 doesn't mean necessarily that you're paying much or anything back to those general unsecured creditors. And the point being, it comes down to an analysis of income minus expenses as to whether or not you have to pay anything back on that general unsecured debt. And generally, most clients, their income minus expenses doesn't leave much, if anything, to have to pay anything back to general unsecured creditors in the end.
The better your credit is going into bankruptcy, the better it's going to be coming out. So people that try to put bankruptcy off for a really long time and they start getting delinquencies reported on their credit, they're really hurting themselves because they are eventually going to need to file bankruptcy. Yes, a bankruptcy can be on your credit for up to 10 years, but that doesn't mean that your credit score is going to be ruined forever. And there's also something that I like to refer to as credit worthiness. Credit worthiness is when a human being is actually looking at your credit report and trying to evaluate you for a loan. And yes, they're going to look at your credit score and they're going to see a bankruptcy. But that's something they're also going to see is your income to debt ratio. All of your debts are wiped out, and now you can afford new debt. Before you filed bankruptcy, you couldn't afford new debt because you were leveraged to the hilt. And then one of the things that I'm very proud of about being a bankruptcy attorney is that when people come into my office, they're very stressed out, and what I do is I give them options. Okay? Maybe it's Chapter 7, maybe it's Chapter 13, maybe it's not even bankruptcy. Maybe what they need to do is take some equity out of their house. But I provide options for them so that when they leave my office, they're always going to be feeling better than when they first came to see me.
To determine if bankruptcy might be the best option for your situation, contact the Bankruptcy Center. In Missouri, call 314-961-9822. In Illinois, call 618-236-7000. Or visit them on the web at www.thebankruptcycenter.net.